Hello and welcome to the Uncultured Nerd Show. My name is Maeve and I'm an uncultured nerd, but I'm slowly getting more cultured because after suffering through just one episode of the live-action Cowboy Bebop, I decided to check out what I'm assuming is the far superior original anime. The plan was to watch just the first episode, make a video on it, and then watch the rest of the series on my own time, but here's the thing. The binge addiction is very real. And as of writing this, I have just finished episode 11. And I think by that bit of information, you can easily see how much I think the live-action version is absolutely, positively, undeniably superior in every way, and I'm obviously kidding. Let's just get into the first 11 episodes with a very broad, unhinged recap. So this guy is Spike Spiegel, and he and his partner Jet Black are bounty hunters, and they are searching for this guy who's a drug smuggler. He and his girlfriend are trying to get to Mars with the money from the drug sale, but Spike interferes and things get a little complicated, ending in a big chase where this guy starts to overdose, so the girlfriend kills him before the police shoot up the whole ship. In episode 2, Spike and Jet go after this guy who is smuggling this adorable fluff ball who it turns out was illegally experimented on and probably has some special abilities that will show up later on in the show. During the big chase, the dog ends up with Spike, and Hakeem turns himself in, denying Spike the bounty. Despite objections, Jet keeps the dog and names him Ein. Episode 3, this lady is in deep debt and is hired to do a job at this casino involving getting a chip from someone who she mistakes Spike for. Funny enough, a bumping incident actually gives Spike the chip, and the mob boss ends up trying to kill Faye and Spike for it. Luckily, Faye gets away in one of the Bebop shuttles, and Spike gets away with the chip, which I guess he just spends the next day at another casino. Episode 4, Faye's out of gas, but finds this cool suitcase on a shipwreck. Meanwhile, Spike and Jet get their hands on this eco-terrorist lady so that they can collect her huge bounty. They also run into Faye and get her suitcase, the contents of which this lady definitely knows something about, but turns out her bounty is cancelled because of an incoming virus attack from her group, but she releases it anyway after she's free. Guess the stuff in the suitcase was the virus, which she managed to steal before she left, and Spike and Faye need to work together in hyperspace to beat her. Luckily, everything works out after a little thrilling space chase, and the virus is only released on the eco-terrorist ship, turning them all into monkeys. So that's wrapped up, and I guess Faye is on the crew now. Episode 5, this guy Vicious lives out to his name and kills a bunch of dudes in the first scene. Turns out he's somehow connected to Spike, but Spike's not about to reveal anything. Faye ends up getting captured by Vicious while trying to get a bounty, which gets Spike to confront Vicious, and after epic fights, Spike blows up the cathedral with Vicious inside and escapes with Faye back to the ship. Episode 6, Spike and Jet go after this guy's bounty, but he follows these two into a building and gets shot out of a window, losing Spike his bounty. But before he dies, he gives Spike a ring and warns him that someone is not the way he looks. When Spike goes after the two people the guy was following, turns out the boy is the dangerous one and is also somehow immune to bullets, so Spike and Jet try to figure it out, and Jet finds out that the child that the man in the wheelchair was with has actually been a child for over 30 years because of a hyperspace singularity thing that stopped him from aging or ever dying. And the ring would actually return time to him and cause him to finally die, which is what the original bounty was trying to do, so Spike manages to make the ring into a bullet and thank goodness aims right so the kid dies, a happy ending. Episode 7, the crew split up to search for a bounty named Decker, and Spike runs into this trucker lady VT who initially likes him but changes her mind when she learns that he is a bounty hunter. Faye mistakes someone else for the target and he gets away but rams into a trucker on the way out, causing VT to go after him for some payback. Unfortunately, this guy is smuggling explosive thingies, but luckily Faye and Spike show up to help and they all make it out alive but lose the bounty in the explosion. Episode 8, the crew pulls off a successful bounty capture, and after collecting the rewards, Spike evades a pickpocket Rocco, who becomes infatuated with his skills and begs for lessons, which Spike eventually gives. When some guys show up, Rocco gives the package he's carrying to Spike and gives him a rendezvous before running off. Turns out the package has a valuable plant inside which cures Venus sickness, I guess a very serious disease in this world. After some poking around, Spike finds Rocco's house and discovered he only stole the plant to pay for his blind sister's eyesight surgery. But that night at the rendezvous, the gang Rocco stole the plant from turns up, and after a shootout, both Rocco and the flower die. Luckily, Rocco had additional seeds hidden at his house, which Spike uses to get his sister the surgery. Episode 9, a satellite is carving images into South America, and a bounty is put on the hacker who was causing it. After crew ask around, they keep hearing about Radical Edward, but no one knows who exactly he is. Turns out Ed is actually a young girl who discovers the satellite is actually a functioning AI who is carving images on its own. Ed contacts the Bebop and promises to get them what they need to collect the bounty in exchange for taking her with them. They get the AI downloaded and make a copy to turn into the police, and another member is added to the crew. Episode 10, Jet visits his ex-girlfriend at a bar, and after he leaves, he finds out her boyfriend has a bounty on his head. He chases them on his own, and after an emotional standoff, the boyfriend is arrested, and Jet moves on from his past. And episode 11, something is loose on the ship and biting the crew, which may be fatal or may just cause temporary sickness. One by one, the crew is bit until only Spike and Ed is left, but Ed is nowhere to be found, so basically it's just Spike, and he remembers he left some lobster thing in the fridge months ago, and the creature must have mutated from that, so he turns off the gravity and shoves the fridge out the airlock, but not before getting bitten. Luckily, the airlock closes before Spike passes out, and as Spike gives us the ultimate lesson to not leave things in the fridge, Ed eats the blob thing. And I guess everything's just fine now. And that was the first 11 episodes of Cowboy Bebop. Man, this is one creative-ass show, which I am really digging. I'm watching the English dub just to make things easier, and also because everyone who recommended the show has just been praising the hell out of how good the English cast is, and I have to agree. I need not remind everyone that I am uncultured, so my experience with Japanese animation dubs is limited to Ghibli, or Ghibli, I really don't know which one is right, which, as I understand it, are pretty top-notch dubs, and I would put this up with the Ghibli dubs. Everyone is so well done, and Spike's voice, it makes me think things and feel things. I really like Spike's voice. I really like it. Now, I should probably address why I stopped at 11 episodes for this review, because it does seem like a pretty random number, but I have a few reasons. Number 1, finals are about to start and this assignment is due on Friday. Number 2, we've pretty much covered everything which happened in the first live-action episode. And 3, I'm pretty sure this was the first big arc of the series, since the next episode appears to be a part 1. And part 1s usually mean something big is about to go down, and this feels like a good place to pause and reflect. So let's start with that reflection by putting aside the remake and just looking at this on its own. First of all, love the aesthetics. As we all know, I am uncultured, so I don't know if these things are super original designs or if they're reminiscent of other stuff, but I really love it. The ship designs especially are very unique, and every single one is different from each other. I'm also noticing what I think is the integration of CGI with the hand-drawn. I usually don't like when these two are meshed because it's rare for it to be done so well. One of the few animes I have watched, which I only watched because it was based on one of my favorite book series, is Del Toro Quest, and that did a pretty horrendous job with the CGI meshing. In some cases, it did a little to introduce the uncanny valley uncomfortableness with the monsters, but for the most part, it just wasn't great. Here, I think it works mostly because it's sci-fi and not fantasy, and it's being used to enhance details and not for major set pieces. On a similar note, the world building feels very natural. We did get some exposition dumping in the first Edward episode explaining why it was necessary to leave Earth, but honestly, that was just a cool little tidbit that could have been skipped over. The world just feels so naturally built. I wasn't constantly questioning how the world got to this point. It was just accepted because this new world is cool enough to exist on its own. Now, going back to the voice cast, I really love all the background and one-off character voices and banter. These two in the second episode were just so fun. Their dynamic is adorable, and it's just one of those things I really love. I appreciate when background characters have so much personality, which isn't technically needed, but is greatly appreciated. Something that is sort of comparing to the remake, but not entirely, I don't really know. I like how the grand arc building isn't thrown in my face. Most of the episodes stand on their own with very little context needed. After these first 11, I'm guessing it's going to ramp up very quickly. It just feels a little more confident in its own awesomeness, that it doesn't have to constantly remind you, hey guys, look at all this other stuff that we're gonna do later. Oh my gosh, it's so cool. Here, it's just so much more subtle, and like I said, it feels more confident in itself that it can take its time and the audience will still be engaged. I also have one smaller thing, but it's nice to watch a show with 20-minute episodes. I understand why streaming shows are usually an hour or longer. They're trying to be on a grander scale, but wow, is it nice to be able to watch one episode in one sitting and not have my butt fall asleep halfway through. And real quick before we move on to comparisons, my favorite episode was actually the last one I watched, called Toys in the Attic. I freaking loved this episode. It was a bit different in style than the others, and there's a lot of very clear homages to Alien and other monster movies. I also love the design of whatever the lobster turned into. It kind of looks like parasite coral or something, I don't know. And that last lesson, don't leave things in the fridge, I think my family could definitely learn something from that, but it was just funny that the last lesson was just everyday advice. I have no clue if this is a highly loved episode with the Cowboy Bebop fandom or if it's hated. I'm not very good at figuring out these things. My favorite show is Futurama, and a lot of episodes that I love are usually put on the worst list, and then some that are put on the best list I don't really care for that much. I'm just not good at figuring out what the groundswell is thinking. But so far, Toys in the Attic, it's my favorite among a pool of pretty amazing episodes. And now we begin the comparisons. What the actual hell were the creators of the live-action show effing thinking? I mean, God, what? Oh my God, let's just start with the basics. I read somewhere that when the creator of the anime was sent the first episode to watch, he barely got through the first scene because it was so obvious to him that this was not his original creation. And by goodness, how could anyone not think that when they have the context of the original? Here's the thing with adaptations. Half the appeal is the intrigue from the updated medium or time period shift from one text to another, and that comes with a certain amount of recognizability. Now, with this all in mind, why the hell would you open the series with a scene that barely resembles anything in the first third of the show? Seriously, there is one scene in all the episodes I watched that I think may have been sort of a reference for the first scene in the live action show. This one where they're getting the bounty on the ship, that sort of seems similar, but not really. Why would you start your adaptation with something fans cannot relate back to the original? And maybe this exact scene does happen in the next 2/3 of episodes, but all the original fans already hate the remake, so I think I'm probably just in the right here. And another thing that is kind of small, but just really annoying, why the hell was there no whistling in the live-action pilot? There was so much whistling in the anime pilot, and it was cool. There's no whistling in the live-action one. Why wasn't there? Anyway, moving on, I'll just go one by one and compare things I had the biggest problems with in the live-action episode, starting with the biggest problem I had, the action. The action sequences and choreography in the remake, like I said, just felt very slow, and from my limited knowledge of anime, it seemed like they were trying to capture the slower pace of anime fights, but didn't realize that, hey, that's not how translation to live action works. The slower paced action in anime is from the lower frame rate that is required because of the hand-drawnness and not as big budget as Western animation stuff. But in animation, it doesn't feel out of place or lazy, it just feels natural because it's animation. There's this suspension of disbelief. And it still looks incredible. I mean, look at this. Just look at this. This feels like a case of trying to be too faithful in the wrong way. Or maybe I'm just thinking too deep into it and they just weren't very good with action and had to go slow to keep all the actors safe. I've got no idea, but in this case, definitely the win goes to the original. One of the more specific problems I can also now compare is with Faye Valentine. My goodness, was her character annoying in the remake, and at the time, I thought this was probably due to the show trying to be too faithful to the original. But honestly, after watching, I think the live action was actually more over the top and annoying than the anime. Yeah, the anime Faye is over the top and is that sort of cool, uncaring catchphrasing type with the gravity-defying honkers, but I think she was still more realistic than whatever this was. A direct translation of her character to live action would feel over the top and annoying, which is why a pulled back version which stayed true while falling a little more back into realism would have been the best way to go. Instead, they go the opposite direction and make her even more quippy and too cool for school and just thinks that everything she says is so hilarious and awesome, and it's just not. You're trying way too hard. Like I said in my first review, I can hear the laugh track after every single one of her lines, and it just got so irritating so quickly. I can see people getting annoyed with anime Faye for being a bit of a dumbass and barging her way into the crew without an invitation, but hey, she's still definitely capable enough and a whole lot more tolerable than this. Another thing I was critical of in the remake was the music choices, and here is where I'm especially confused. Because there were a lot of moments in just the first episode where the music was so specifically odd that I thought, this has got to be directly from the original. I mean, they basically copy-pasted the intro, why wouldn't they do that for the music? But I guess it wasn't. And for this point, I want to specifically talk about this scene, which happens at the end of both the first episodes. These two drug smugglers go out in a hail of bullets, and in the live action, the music was doing that thing of showing something intense while playing very calming music to emphasize how much more intense the scene is, which sometimes works, but I don't think it worked here. The reason I did not think it worked in the remake was that I didn't know these people, and the show didn't do a good job in making me care about them. There was some backstory with the woman's father being powerful that was hinted at, but yeah, not really enough to make me care, and I don't know if that's going to still show up later in this original series, I have no idea, but let's just compare to the original for now. We actually know less about these two in the show. There's no powerful father backstory, there's just some context of the bounty on the man's head, and that these two are trying to get to Mars. But we do get a few very important details which do that key work in making me care when the bullets start flying. Number 1, the debilitating effects of the eye drug. I know this exact distortion of facial expression isn't really possible to show in live action, but they could have done more than nothing. I didn't get anything about the drug being super dangerous in the live action version, where here his addiction feels a lot more brutal. And number 2, she's the one who shoots him. In this one act, I get a million million times more tragedy than the remake could ever give me with any amount of tragic music. The act gives a lot more information about the character we've barely met and will, I'm guessing, never meet again. The fact that she would rather kill him and herself than let him die from his own vice says a lot more than him dying of bounty hunter gunshots. I'm not sure if we're going to get any more backstory on them in the original anime, like was what the live action said true about her having a powerful father and that's going to come to cause trouble. I don't know, but I can say confidently that I felt their deaths hit way harder in the original than the remake. On that note, let's get a little bit more into the music. For my 2 exposures to anime, I've noticed that one big difference between Western animation is the use of music, or more accurately, the lack of music. In Western animation, or better yet, in Western entertainment, in general, music is usually present throughout movies and shows, especially in high emotion and high action scenes. Action scenes are often famous for their soundtrack, which hypes the audience up along with whatever buff dude is fighting the other buff dude. In anime, at least these 2 I've seen, it seems the power comes a lot more from silence. While music does appear often, there are many moments I can point to where only diegetic sound is used, but if the scene were under Hollywood direction, there would be no question in adding music to heighten the emotion of the scene. And while there are some scenes where I think music may have been helpful, in many I'm genuinely surprised how effective the visuals alone were in communicating intense action and emotion without the need of any musical support. And now my last complaint, which did involve looking up some stuff. I wanted to know what all these characters looked like in live action as they appeared in the anime, and when I looked up Ed, I saw that she only appears in 1 live action episode. So I dug a little deeper and saw that she in fact only appears in the last scene as sort of a season 2 teaser. So did the live action show cover in 10 one-hour episodes what the original accomplished in 8 20-minute episodes? Sounds very efficient to me. And maybe they added a bunch of stuff and fit in a lot more from the 2/3 of the series I've not watched yet, but seriously, watching just 1 episode of the live action show felt like a slog, and watching 11 from the original has been a breeze, so I think that says a lot. Also, from the trailer and the first episode of the remake, it seems like Vicious is built up to be the big bad of the season. So is the final showdown of the first season just the climax from episode 5? Or did they change so much that nothing makes sense? I think it's just that nothing makes sense. I'll figure it out when I finish the series, but I'm pretty sure nothing makes sense. So yeah, the live action one really sucked. I mean, I didn't like it on its own, but now with context of some of the original, yeah, it was bad. And I always feel bad about saying that because it's obvious a lot of hard work went into it, and in some cases, it was probably someone's passion project. But yeah, not good. But on the bright side, this remake did push me into watching this really great anime, which I probably never would have watched on my own, and I'm real excited to finish. And that's about it for this episode of the Uncultured Nerd Show. Thank you so much for encouraging me to watch this. I never would have watched on my own, but I'm so glad I have because it's fun, funny, badass, and I'm excited to see what comes next. Thank you, Professor and family members, for watching, and I'll be back with however much of the show I watch next time. See y'all later!